Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. I'll apologize right up front. I have a little bit of a head cold, so if my voice sounds different, it's not because I'm trying to change the way I talk or anything. It's simply that, well, I got some congestion. Well, Scott sent in another one. This is a beautiful Penn 720. It's part of the 7 series, and we're most commonly associating the 700 with either the greeny or the black and gold. And in this case, we have a very grease-choked blue one, or with the fishes on the side that became the box for Penn. Well, this one would be collectible because it is, well, it's unusual, right? It's not the basic 720 in color and appearance. And Penn did that in a couple of different versions. And actually, I have one that has been hanging around my place for a while. And it's actually in a copper color with the gold and the black. So those are more unusual, rarer, if you will, and as a result would be more collectible. Well, I'm going to show you how to take this reel apart. We'll clean up all that old grease and dirt. We'll service it, and you'll get to see what the 720 looks like. And we'll hopefully show you how to do it yourself, which is what this channel is all about. Well, we're going to start by removing the exterior pieces and parts. I'm going to start by taking off the star adjuster, or the drag button adjuster. And then we should be able to remove the spool. Notice on the spool that you do have a Teflon insert or washer there below. And then the rest is somewhat standard stock kind of stuff for the reel. It turns nice and easily. And we'll show you what's inside. Well, while we do that, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. And if you do subscribe to my channel, please use the notification button to see when I'm posting videos that, well, you may like. Those videos cover all kinds of things: vintage reels, current stock reels, spinning, bait casting, conventional, and so on. And if you're into the art of reel repair, you just like learning about fishing reels, well, that's a good place to go. Next, I'm going to take the handle off. This is a different handle. Notice most of the time we saw the black or the metal ones in this era. This one's even different from the standard bullet type of handle that you would have had on those models. And I guess they changed with the times. Handle is off. When I take the pieces and parts off, they go in a parts tray. And those parts trays are there to keep the pieces all central for me so that I know where to go and find them. Well, we're going to remove the side plate now. Match the screw in the side plate and the screwdriver blade. Don't go with the small blade. Go with the one that's closest to the slot. That way you don't risk butterflying the pieces or not. That's a nice aluminum side plate. And I expect to see a lot of grease when we come in here, and I'm not disappointed. There's a lot of grease in there, and that's why this is as sluggish as it is. Well, I'm going to use a penetrating oil. In this case, it's WD-40, but any penetrating oil will do. It just seems to be whatever store I'm in at the time, and whatever they have for penetrating oil is the one that I kind of gravitate to. Doesn't matter much to me if it's any of the above. What I use it for is a solvent, and it says, it stops squeaks and it lubricates, and I don't use it for lubrication. I simply use it for cleaning. And there's a little bit under here. Now, Penn makes a rod and reel cleaner, and I think that's probably the safer way to go when you're working on one that, well, you just don't want to scratch up too much. And I'll use that on the outside of the cover here. So I just wanted to get the dirt that was hanging around in that one little section there off. I'll put that into my parts tray. And this one's a little bit different than what you're used to seeing on Penn technology. Usually you see a crossline block and a screw and everything. In this case, it's a kind of a staple. It's a double winged piece here. And that's holding in the axle shaft and the crossline block. There are a couple of different variations, but a lot of them do use that through screw, or that, in this case, a double pin. The old Mitchells had some of them on there. I think the 304, if I'm thinking correctly. The smaller ones use that kind of a technology. Well, there's a lot of old grease on there, but we should be able to remove the axle shaft. We're going to kind of keep turning it here. It's going to, of course, have all of that stuff slide out on the crosswind block there. But I did want to get that out of the way. And now I'm going to take a 4/0 steel wool, just buff off the old grease so that this one will slide up and down through the pinion gear nice and easily. I'll inspect that to make sure that it's nice and clean, that there's no burrs or the like on it, and that there can go in the parts tray as well. We should next be able to just pull off that crosswind block, and you can see why it was struggling so much when we were cranking it. It's because all of the old grease kind of gathered around it and made it a little bit tough. So I use the least abrasive approach that I can when I'm taking the greases off. I like to try and use a solvent if I can, like that penetrating oil. I like to use paper towels and cotton swabs and things like that that I know won't injure the finishes or anything. And then if it needs to, like here, it's a little tough getting that last little bit out of the channel, I'll go in there with something I can just pick it out with. Maybe another spray of that penetrating oil, and just kind of do the best you can to clean it up. There's a stud on the main gear that's going to slide in this channel. That's going to cause the oscillation because the stud is offset. It's not dead center in the piece, and that's what's going to make the reel go up and down. Kind of hard to see, but this is the stud I'm referring to right here. Well, you can't get the main gear out like this. It's trapped by that pinion gear. The pinion gear is held in place by this nut. Well, you're going to need a deep socket for that, and I keep my deep sockets nearby. And I'm not sure I even have one that's small. Well, I think I do. There you go. I got lucky. I was going to have to go to a smaller set. I need the smaller set here because of the depth of the bowl. You cannot get a wrench in there to turn that. All right. Let me grab that. I'm kind of curious. I got a piece hanging here. I don't know what it's to. Well, let's take the bowl off. Now we should have a set screw here. We can remove that set screw. This is a set screw like you will find in, say, a Mitchell 302. It's holding that shaft in, and then you can just simply pull up on that. Notice that the hole there, that's what that set screw is going to hold that fast to. And now we should be able to push that main gear out. And sometimes with all that grease choked in there, it may not be that easy. Sometimes you're going to need a little assist. I'm just going to use a Phillips head screwdriver to help push it through there. And then look at the back of the case here. This case is just loaded with the dried grease and the cause of the issues. Well, I'm going to spray this down with the penetrating oil. I'm going to shut the camera off for a moment or two. We'll just let it kind of work and we'll come back. Okay, it's been several minutes, and I always encourage folks to kind of do this. Just be patient. It's not a race. You don't have to get it all done in 10 minutes. And you can certainly take time, go get a beverage of your choice, let the solvent do its work, and then you can see as you come back in, I'm using a flat-bladed screwdriver here as a scraper. Well, a lot of that stuff is going to come off a lot easier than trying to chip it off by using the older stuff. Alright, you can see we just have piles of this in here. So this reel has quite obviously been sitting a long time. I don't know if Scott found this one at a flea market. I don't know. Most of the time when you see something like this, somebody had had the reel for quite some time. They preserved it. They were using it. And then they put it aside for some reason. Maybe it was a family. Maybe it was somebody's father or brother or mom or somebody that was using the reel. And, well, They just stopped using it, got put aside, and then eventually it winds up at a flea market or online sale or something where it's time to give it a second chance, let somebody else use it. And that's where Scott came along. And Scott said, I can't use it like it is. Can you service this for me? All right, well, we're just kind of using the flat side of it. I'm not trying to scrape any more than I need to, but I've got a good amount of that out, and we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to load it up, and we'll go on to the other parts, and then we'll come back to this one. It's a good time to get rid of that paper towel. Go get a fresh one, and see if we can't mop off the back of the main gear, which is corresponding to that inset there. It has the same thing. And again, I'm just kind of riding the main gear, very light in approach, just trying to get done what I can do without injuring the metals. All right, we're off on that. Notice that you have a Teflon washer on the back side of this. Got most of it there. And that's just knowing that all of this old grease is in there. You know that this reel is going to spin nicely once you just take the obstructions out of the way. And in this case, the obstruction is the old grease. All right, it's done nicely. So let's turn ourselves to the face side. I can't imagine how that crosswind gear was running here, or block, because there's so much chunk on it. This chunk is a technical term. We're going to do the same thing here. We're going to load that with the penetrating oil. I'm just going to put that in the collar of my vise, and that's going to enable me to let that soak in when we come back and pay our attention to this again. So much of reel repair is cleaning, inspection, getting rid of the old greases and dirts and debris and the like, replacing any worn parts, and then just getting it ready for another season by relubing it, reassembling it, and kind of moving on. All right, well, that side's good. So I got a little bit of a mess down here. So Penn's Spinfisher series is up to number 6 now in the scheme of counting things. In recent years, they kind of jumped 5 and 6 real quickly, but the originals, the 700 series, was kind of generation 1, and then they changed the color of the reel, but they didn't change much other than that for the Z series and this one as well. Then they started making changes. They made changes in the design. They went from, in some cases, the spiral gear drive to a more conventional kind of straight up main gear crosswind block drive kind of reels. And they changed the materials that they were using. They went from metal cases to graphite cases, and they did some other things there. And what we're doing here, I just loaded it up one more time. I want to get that anti-reverse dog working properly, and to do that I got to get some of that old grease off the side there. There is a spring here under that dog. If you took the dog off, that's how it rides. And we should be ready to go. And again, the more you get off of here from the grease standpoint, the better it's going to be for you in terms of performance. All right. Well, if you have any questions on this reel or any reel, maybe even things like the manufacturing history of it, when was it made? These were made in the 70s. And probably tell by the exterior design on them. And if you have questions like that, if you leave them in the comment section, I will try to answer them for you. And I'll do my best to get you that answer. Sometimes I don't know. One of them that I always seem to stumble on, I just don't know, and I don't have a good resource for it. I get asked what's the max drag on certain reels. I just don't know. If I can find it, I'll let you know. Sometimes it does get published, but it doesn't get published a lot with the older reels. Or it wasn't published a lot with the older reels. Alright, well, I've kind of knocked that anti-reverse off a little bit. So let's go reinstall it the right way. we're in pretty good shape there. All right, I'm satisfied that we've got about as much as we can do there. I'll just bathe that one more time. There's just a little lump or two more left of the grease. We'll go back to that main gear. We're going to clean that one up. I wear a protective glove on my one hand just for this type of stuff. I don't like getting all that stuff on me if I can avoid it. And if I can't avoid it, well, I wish I could figure out a way on my right hand, which is my working hand, but that's never been comfortable for me in terms of gripping apart or what have you. All right, you can see how the penetrating oil and the light took its grease off. Now I'm just using a wire brush to knock any residuals out of those gears in the channel. I'm going to inspect all those gears to make sure that they are all uniform, not chipped or cracked. This is an aluminum gear, and the teeth, you want to make sure they're all set up. I'll come back and we'll just buff that last piece out there. And every time I turn it around, I see one more little piece of grease that I'd like to get out of there. And we're gonna call that it at this point. All right, the shaft of the main gear, it's a little bit of grease on it. You want to get grease on the face where we were just scraping it off, because that's where your crosswind block is going to ride. And you want to get a good amount of grease into the teeth of the main gear. That grease got onto the inside of it because there was a lot of grease in the reel, and centrifugal force threw it off and threw it in there. But you do want to make sure that the teeth have a nice coating of grease there. I'm using an artist's brush to spread that grease. I put the main gear back in, set that aside for a moment. Now when I opened up the rotor, this little guy was in there. And that little guy belongs to the spool. So somehow that had become disconnected in the process. So we're just going to take a moment to reconnect that. That's the clicker. When your drag is going out, that's what makes the click. Let's see if we can get this back in. How it fell out, but it did fall out. Now you got to click, and as that hits the ridges on your axle shaft, you will get a click, 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 letting you know that the drag is being released. And just a little bit more on the bowl. You didn't see that. This was happening off camera when I did it, but I did spray that down as well. And it's always good to just put a spray on that assembly there as well. Make sure that that works nicely. We're going to just put a shot of oil here on the trip mechanism, and we're going to go over to our pinion gear now, and we're going to do the same thing there that we just did with the other. We're going to take the hard brush, we're going to brush out the old grease in the gear. I brush it onto a paper towel so that I don't get it onto my bench and transfer any more than is needed. And I'm also noticing as I do this that there may be some old grease inside there. Collar came off. Let's try and push something down in there to knock it out. And then we can just reconnect this. You can put a little bit of grease there. It's probably a little ohm in there that let me notice that. If you flip this around and you kind of forgot which way it goes, just look on your pinion gear here. There's a narrow side and a wide side, so just get the corresponding sides to that as you go to reinstall. And let's go ahead and just grab the brush here. Now I can reinsert that now that we have the main gear back in. And you want to find the hole, that hole right there. I showed it to you on the way out. And when you go to reinstall, find the hole so that you can match it up on the way in. Go ahead and get that set screwed in. That goes next. And that'll hold that collar down and allow the pinion gear to turn. If you're not set all the way in, chances are you don't have it lined up properly. It's looking like I'm missing here, so let's do that again. just a little tip on that that's going to make the difference there. I'm just going to use my pin to pull it over just a little bit. And we should be better this time. These reels are, as a lot of folks like to say, bulletproof. There's a simple design, there's not a lot of moving parts, they're well made, and they will last. There we go, I got it that time. You just feel, and it's a matter of feel when you do it the right way. For the next part then, let's just take some of these pieces off to the side. And what I like to do before I go any further is attach the handle to the reel so that I can keep everything together. And you can pretty much, you'll see that it's working nicely. You have to pull up on that pinion gear because the rotor is what holds that up. Let's go ahead and take that rotor then. And there's a tie down segment there. And then you need to match the flat sides of the pinion gear with the flat sides of the keyway. Rotate your rotor collar so that it sits in that indentation. Go ahead and grab the nut. And then we can take our ratchet again, tighten that up. And you can give it a spin now, and that should operate nicely, which it does. It's a nice smooth turning reel now that we do not have all that grease inside. Let's go ahead and complete this bottom section then. A little bit of grease onto the face and into the slot. And now we can reset that. This is a symmetrical piece. It doesn't matter which side goes up and what side goes down. You should note, however, when you do fishing reels, that sometimes they are not symmetrical. And if they're not, you need to identify which side is high and which side is low. A little bit of light grease onto the axle shaft. Insert that in, and as you're bringing that in now, you need to make sure that you see where those two holes are, because that's what you have to merge in now. Just like we had to pick the other one. Okay, when you line that up, that's a visual. Go ahead and get what I'll call a staple, but it's a dual pin. That should push all the way through. If it's not pushing all the way through, you don't have it lined up properly. You can wiggle this a little bit to get those correct, and that is the correct side of it now. Again, you can give that a quick run, and you can see all the difference in the world is there now. All right, all we have to do on the bottom side then is get that little tab, slide that into the recess. Grab our screw on the bottom, get that in. So this one applies to all of the 720s. Essentially, mechanically, they're the same. This one's a cosmetic change, and again, materials change too. You got aluminum here. Let's just make sure that the bail that we were playing around with works. And we can go up top here. There should be a couple of small drag washers in here. So I'm going to take that C-clip out. Try to take that C-clip out. I'm going to use a small pick, or in this case a micro screwdriver, to try and get behind that little C-clip. Be careful, these are clips that have a lot of spring tension on them, and it's not hard at all to see that spring fly. So there we go. And then I'm going to grab it with a pliers here to try and pull it out the rest of the way. And that's, you saw me covering them with my hand. That's because these things tend to fly. Now we should have just a small washer in here or two. These are Teflon. You don't need to do anything with Teflon, but I do like to check them. And there's one on the bottom here. That's okay. So what you want to make sure of these is that they're clean and free. And that's exactly what's going on here. Okay, you want to clean the cavity. You can see we have a little bit of debris along the side there. Get that all cleaned out. Make sure it's nice and shiny like the day it came out of the factory. Again, this is an aluminum sided spool as well. I'm noticing that there's a little bit of dry grease in there. You don't have to grease Teflon, it's self-lubricating. But sometimes people do. Alright, just make sure they're nice and clean, the cavity is clean. You start with the plastic washer. You're going to find 2 round washers that have relatively rectangular internals to it. Those are called keyed washers. They go top and bottom. Second of the Teflon washers. This is the one in the middle now. It's a hex. That's going to hold the spool to the shaft. Last of the plastics, last of the keyed washers. Then we go back, find that spring, and again there's a lot of tension on that, so even when you're going inbound with that, please hold it so that you can set it properly. It's going to fit in a slot just like that. Now we have that little click mechanism is actually going to work this time rather than laying. You can hear that how it's supposed to work, and that's a whole lot better than it was laying in the bottom of the rotor cup when we got the reel in. Alright, just have to put the button on, tighten that down, we'll give it a final turn and a nice little cleanup, and we should be good to go. There we go, nice and tight. When you're tight, back it off. Don't leave the drive washers under pressure. It's not needed. Alright, my glove has been transferring a lot of oil to the reel, so when you go to clean it up, you want to do your best to get rid of the grease, not transfer more of it over to it. So we'll take that glove off. While I'm doing that, I want to thank our first responders and essential personnel for everything it is that they've been doing to keep us safe. And to all, I do appreciate your efforts as this pandemic roars on. Alright, there we go. A beautiful 720. I'm going to just put the anti-reverse back on. Check that. Check the bail. Fires nicely. Scott, you got a nice, somewhat unusual Penn 720 ready to go fishing again. Thanks for sending that in. To everybody who's been watching, thank you for your patience. I hope you've learned something today. Again, if you have questions, please leave them in the comments section. And to everybody, please stay safe, stay well, have a happy new year, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.